to Analyzing with Max Strieser, and today we are looking at the poem of Siegfried Sassoon called Aftermath. Aftermath is written by Siegfried Sassoon in 1919. He served as a soldier in the Royal Welch Fusiliers, which was a line infantry regiment of the British Army. He and other soldiers went through terrible times. After the war, he continued his life as a poet. Sassoon was mainly writing about the team warfare. That is because he has been through it all by himself. It was probably the most horrible time of his life. He frequently talks about bullets and trenches. Another theme that includes his poems is fear. Sassoon wrote about the horrors of war, which directly links his life and experiences with the content of his poems. The reader is actually reading a part of Sassoon's life. His poem Aftermath is about the attacks in Mametz-Wood, France in 1916. The British Army, including the Royal Welch Fusiliers with Sassoon in it, fought against the position of Germany. The narrator of the poem Aftermath describes horrible times during World War I and calls it a horrible game. He dives deeply into the situations of one specific moment, the moment of the attack in Mametz Wood. Sassoon gives a deeply detailed description of his vision, feeling and sense of smell, so that the reader is able to imagine what really happened in that battlefield. For example, do you remember the rats and the stench of corpses rotting in front of the frontline trench? The poem starts with an introduction of his experiences during World War I. After that, he describes the horrible surroundings and smells on the battlefield. His poem ends with an expression of his personal anger and frustration during the time. Have you forgotten yet? That is the opening of his poem. Striking is the personal pronoun you, which is used by Sassoon for about 16 times in his poem Aftermath. It should be very, very important if the whole poem exists of 5 stanzas and 23 lines. Who does Sassoon mean with the personal pronoun you? And why is he writing to that specific person? These are the main questions of this analysis. In a minute, you are going to listen to Jeremy Irons, who is reading Sassoon's poem out loud. Try to pay attention to images and the video and listen carefully to the text. Try to imagine his feelings during the war, and on top of that, think about a main question to who Sassoon is addressing in his poem.
Have you forgotten yet? For the world's events have rumbled on since those gagged days, like traffic checked while at the crossing of city ways. But the past is just the same, and war's a bloody game. Have you forgotten yet? Look down and swear by the slain of the war that you'll never forget. Do you remember the dark months you held the sector at Mametz? The nights you watched and wired and dug and piled sandbags on parapets? Do you remember the rats? And the stench of corpses rotting in front of the frontline trench? And dawn coming, dirty white, and chill with a hopeless rain? Do you ever stop and ask, is it all going to happen again? Do you remember that hour of din before the attack? And the anger the blind compassion that seized and shook you as you peered at the doomed and haggard faces of your men. Do you remember the stretcher cases lurching back, with dying eyes and lolling heads? Those ashen grey masks of the lads who once were keen and kind and gay. Have you forgotten yet? Look up and swear by the green of the spring that you'll never forget.
Hopefully you enjoyed watching and listening to the previous video. Can you describe your own feeling? Probably you noticed what I meant with a detailed description of Sassoon's experiences during war. Right now, I want to inform you about the literary devices that Sassoon used in his poem. I call him the master of literary devices. After I finished analyzing the poem, it was fully discovered with a red layer, which meant that it was full of literary devices. Alright, let's move on to the first literary device. I want to start with the rhyme schemes. It's about rhyming words at the end of a line. Striking is that each stanza includes a different rhyme scheme. I only mention the rhyme schemes of the first 3 stanzas to prevent this analysis from tedium. The rhyme scheme of the first stanza includes A, B, B, C, C, D. Yet is on its own. Days rhymes on ways, flow on go, and spare is also on its own. The second rhyme scheme includes A, B, B. Game is on its own, and yet rhymes on forget. And the final rhyme scheme of the third stanza includes A, B, B, C, C. Mehmet rhymes on parapets, stange on trench, and rain on a game. The second literary device is symbolism. A symbol contains several layers of meanings. First, Sassoon wrote about a bloody game. The first layer is that he talks literally about a bloody game. He refers to soldiers that died during the firefight. They are laying in splatters of blood. The second layer is that he used bloody as an invective for war. Normal games includes a lot of fun and excitement, but this game isn't fun at all. The second literary device of symbolism is, for example, his lines, "For the world's events have rumbled on since those gag days, like traffic checks while at a crossing of city ways." This is a quote coming from the first stanza of his poem. Sassoon isn't talking about the literal meaning of the traffic that is crossing on city ways, but he wants to say that traffic situations are part from our daily routines. We do not pay attention to that situation because they are very normal. In contrast to war, those situations were not normal, and he tries to let people think about all the people that died during war. The third literary device is repetition. It includes repeating words, sentences, or stanzas. The first form of repetition is, "Have you forgotten yet?" Sassoon wants people to not forget those horrible situations of war that happened in the past. And that is why he repeats this question 3 times. The second form of repetition is, "Do you remember?" It has the same meaning as the previous one. Sassoon wants people to look back and memorize those people who fought for your country. The final form of repetition is you, and that is our main question. To who does he speak? Let's answer this question. The fourth literary devices is a rhetorical question. We've seen them before. Do you remember? This question does not require an answer. It's a rhetorical question because the reader isn't able to remember the situation that he describes because they weren't there at that moment. The final form of literary device is imagery. Imagery is when you use words and phrases to create mental images. First, do you remember the rats and the stench of corpses rotting in front of the frontline trench, and dawn coming, dirty white, and chill with a hopeless rain? The second form of imagery is, do you remember the dark months you held the sector at Mamet? The night you watched and wired and dug and piled sandbags on parapets? The third form is, do you remember that hour of din before the attack? And the anger, the blind compassion that sighed and shook you then, as you peered at the doomed and haggard faces of your men? And the final one is, do you remember the stretcher case lurching back, with dying eyes and lolling heads, those ashen grey masks of the lads who once were keen and kind and gay? Unfortunately, we arrived at the final part of this episode, answering our main question. The main question was, to who is Sassoon addressing to in his poem Aftermath, and why? First of all, he refers to the reader of the poem. By doing this, he grabs the reader's attention because they realize that Sassoon is talking to yourself. He makes people think and realize that being a soldier isn't just a normal job. The second answer is that he is addressing survivors of a soldier that died in the battlefield. Sassoon underlines that they are heroes because they experienced the horrible elements of war and fought for the country, the actual country where you are living in. The final group of persons are those who already forget to people that lost their life when they fought for their country. Those people should be ashamed because you don't know what living as a soldier includes. They offered their life for you because you live in a country where they fought. Next week we will discuss the poem It Was a Lover and His Lass by William Shakespeare. This was it for today, and I wish you all the best in the weekend.